Good evening, Sukhi Hatu. Welcome to our weekly Facebook Dhamma sharing with Brother Billy Tan. Please allow me to introduce Brother Billy. Brother Billy Tan is a retired Six Sigma business development consultant, and is certified as Master Practitioner of Neurolinguistic Programming, Clinical Hypnotherapist, Laughter Yoga Teacher, and Laughter Ambassador. In sharing the Dhamma, Brother Billy studied under the late Venerable Dr. Punaji Mahathera, and has delivered Dhamma sharing throughout Malaysia and other countries. In recent years, Brother Billy has also shared the Dhamma extensively in the Philippines, as resident Dhamma lecturer at Wisdom Park, Manila, as well as to Catholic seminary students, universities, theosophical societies, and to inmates at the women's prison in Metro Manila. Currently, Brother Billy is engaged in several humanitarian projects, to provide pandemic relief and assistance to underprivileged and marginalized communities in the Philippines, Sri Lanka and other Asian countries. Please join us to welcome Brother Billy, to offer his Dhamma sharing on the topic, Dhammapada Study, the goodness of giving. If you have any question pertaining to this topic, please post them as comments under this Facebook page. We would appreciate if you click like as you join this sharing. Thank you.
Good evening, Sukihotu. Welcome to another Dhamma sharing. Today will be the last sharing for this year, 2021. After this, I'll take a short break of a couple of weeks, and then in January, I will announce when I will resume the Dhamma sharing for the year 2022. So for today, I would like to share with you this link. Please use this link to download the presentation slides. You can type up this link and you can download the presentation slides in the PDF format and follow along today's sharing. Okay, so today we're going to cover a few Dhammapada verses, two very important Dhammapada verses about giving, and I'll also share one sutra on the goodness of giving. So the topic, the goodness of giving, about how we can benefit from giving in many ways. So today we will just take a look at two of the verses where there's a background story behind it, how people have, how during the time of the Buddha that his disciples have responded to the call to give, okay? So let's look at the first verse, which is verse 116 in English. It is translated as, "Be expedient in doing good, restrain your mind from evil. He who hesitates in doing good, his mind is allured by evil." Simply put is that when we feel we need to do something or we feel it's time to do a good deed, don't hesitate, just do it. Be expedient, right? Hasten, just get it done. And then while you're doing it, just take your mind off anything that is unwholesome. And the problem is that if you allow your mind to idle, if you don't focus your mind on doing good, when your mind is idling, it is possible that your mind get distracted, right? So, and it can be distracted by very unwholesome thoughts. So let's take a look at the story behind this Dhammapada verse 116. Okay, it is the story of this Brahmin with a single robe. Now, Brahmin in those days in India, they have different classes of people, right? They have the highest class, which is the royalty, and then the next, the royalty and the warriors. These are the chiefs, the lords and the kings. Then comes the scholars, the Brahmin. Brahmin is a person who is well educated, a person who is highly knowledgeable, and usually comes from a wealthy family. So this is usually a person of good upbringing, right? Very fortunate birth into a wealthy family and having a good upbringing. So this is the story of a Brahmin with a single robe. And his name is Ekasataka. Ekasataka simply means little one robe, or just a person with one robe. That's what his name is. Basically, it's him and his wife, right? and this living in this place called Savatthi. Ekasataka lives in Savatthi and with his wife. Between them, they happen to have only one outer robe, outer garment. Basically, this is like the large jacket, right? It's not something you wear inside. You wear your clothes, and then during winter months, then you put on this large jacket. You could say it's a very large outer robe, outer garment, okay? And they have this very nice one that he shares with his wife. But they have only just this one, very nice one. And basically, they could not go out together in the evening when it's cold because they cannot share one robe. One person will wear the robe and the other person won't have a robe to wear. So therefore, they have to take turns, so to speak, right? So when they go to the monastery, they like to wear this robe out of respect for the monks. So the wife goes to the monastery to listen to the Buddha during the day, and the husband will go in the evening. And when the wife goes, she's wearing the robe. The husband stays at home. In the evening, the husband goes and listens to the Buddha and wearing the robe, and the wife stays at home. So they take turn like that most of the time, right? Now, these two are actually very devoted followers of the Buddha. They actually go to the temple or the monastery every day to listen to the Buddha. And when the Buddha is not in town, then another senior monk like Sariputta, Moggallanius, and a few others, they would be delivering the Dhamma talks. So this husband and wife, right, Ekasataka, husband and wife, are very devoted followers of the Buddha. So they always like to listen to the teachings of the Buddha. So one night in the evening, and this is only when the husband went to the monastery, the wife is at home. So the Brahmin listened to the Buddha. And during the time when he was listening to the Buddha speaking and delivering the Dhamma talks, he felt very motivated. His whole body felt very excited and infused with great gratitude for the Buddha's teaching. He was so touched by the good teachings of the Buddha that he wanted to offer the robe to the Buddha. But of course, that is his only robe. You know, if he offered that one robe to the Buddha, he and his wife will no longer have this outer robe to use. But he wanted to offer it to the Buddha because in those days, when people have anything of value and it can be used by the Buddha, they make an offering. So a robe, outer garment, can of course be used by Buddha when the Buddha goes out at night when the weather is cold, you see. So Ekasataka wanted to offer his one and only robe to the Buddha. So he realized that if he were to give it away, and that is his only outer garment, then there will be none left for him and his wife. But he also didn't mind that because he's so touched by what the Buddha was teaching. Right? So he let go that thought, and he did not hesitate. Right? At first, he was a little bit hesitant, but he realized he had to give. So he was sort of dinging and donging between wanting to give and not wanting to give, sort of holding back, a little bit hesitant. So as he was listening to the Buddha throughout the night, and the Buddha was constantly teaching the monks, so lay people, they are allowed, those who are dedicated, they are allowed to sit there and listen to the Buddha's teachings. So as the first and second watches of the night, see, they divide the night or the evening and the night into 3 watches, 3 time periods. The first watch is usually the evening. Typically, in our time, it is around 7 p.m., 8 p.m., around that time. That is the first watch of the night. The second watch of the night is when it approaches midnight, around 10 p.m. to 12 to midnight. That is the second watch of the night. And then immediately past midnight, that would be the third watch of the night. So during the first and the second watches of the night, he had not offered the robe to the Buddha. He was hesitant. He held back a little bit. But at the third watch of the night, just past midnight, he realized that, oh no, I'm not going to keep this robe anymore. I will offer to the Buddha, because this thought came to his mind. If I am so miserly and hesitant, I will miss the opportunity of ending worldly suffering. I must offer my outer garment to the Buddha. This is the thought that came to his mind, that he realized that if he was hesitant, this display of hesitancy, this display of selfishness, this lack of generosity would hinder his cultivation, would hinder him from freeing himself from all suffering. That means ultimately attaining arahantship. Okay, so he decided on the third watch of the night he would offer it to the Buddha. So he did that, and he placed the robe at the foot of the Buddha and bowed and did all the respectful actions, and then he declared, "I have triumphed," and he declared 3 times. What he meant was he was so happy that he had overcome his hesitancy. He had overcome his sense of selfishness. He had now become generous and not think about wanting to keep the robe for himself anymore. So he actually was very happy with that. And as he declared, "I have triumphed," a lot of people heard that and they were very touched by his effort. And the word of what he did went to the king, King Pasenadi, right? That in Kosala, that is the area of Kosala, and the king was Pasenadi. Now, Pasenadi is a very devoted follower of the Buddha, right? Although he was the king, he was very humble, very, very generous. He would offer a lot of Dhana to all the monks. He would do everything possible to help the Buddha expand the teachings of the Buddha. So he worked very hard to make sure that he followed what the Buddha was teaching. And that is King Pasenadi. And King Pasenadi is such a kind person, and he's a soft-spoken person. He's not one of those snobbish kings, right? Very humble person and very generous. And he is very well loved by his subjects. Okay, so he heard about it, right? And he heard of what happened with this Brahmin who gave away his one and only robe, and he heard him scream out, "I have triumphed," and he was very touched by that. So King Pasenadi, learning that of what happened to Ekasataka, he wanted to reward Ekasataka. So learning that Ekasataka had offered to the Buddha his one and only robe, then the king commented that this Brahmin had done something very, very great, had done something which is not easy to do, and he should be rewarded. Because as I said, this King Pasenadi is a very kind and humble person and very generous. So he wanted to reward the Brahmin for giving up his one and only robe to offer to the Buddha. So the king then ordered his men to give to Ekasataka a piece of cloth. Well, it says cloth, but it's actually another large piece of material that can be easily made into a robe. So he offered a very nice one. Of course, coming from the king, these are very expensive gifts. These are not just a piece of cloth that you buy from the shop, but it would be very high quality, high grade, and people would cherish having it. So he offered one piece to Ekasataka for his devotion and generosity of giving up his one and only robe. But the Brahmin, on the other hand, realized that he cannot keep this. He had to offer this to the Buddha again. So the Brahmin again offered this one piece that the king gave him and offered again to the Buddha. And now the king heard he had given away that one piece. The king was very touched. Then the king gave him 2 pieces, right? Double the reward, so that he can keep one and give one to the Buddha. But no, the next time round, Ekasataka gave away all 2 to the Buddha. Again, the Brahmin offered the 2 pieces to the Buddha. And now the king heard that, and he rewarded Ekasataka with double the number again. Now he gave him 4 pieces, And this went on day after day. So the next day, Ekasataka gave away all 4 to the Buddha, right? And he just gave away whatever the king rewarded him with, because he realized that, well, when he offered to the Buddha, it wasn't just for the Buddha alone to wear. It was also something which the Buddha can then pass on to the monks. So that would be very useful for the monks. So he again offered whatever was given to him by the king, and each time the king would double the reward, and that went on a few more times, right, until it reached 32. That means from 4 it became 8, from 8 it became 16, from 16 now it became 32. So now the king rewarded Ekasataka with 32 pieces of cloth. This time, as Ekasataka had so many, abundance, he realized that he should now keep one for himself and one for his wife. So Ekasataka went ahead and kept 1 piece for himself and a second one for his wife, and offered the remaining 32 pieces all to the Buddha. So he was very generous, right? Eventually, of course, he had so many, he decided to keep 2 pieces. Okay. And now the king heard that, the king was very touched. Again, the king commented that this Brahmin had performed such difficult tasks and he should be rewarded. Now the king wanted to reward him with something else, because there's no longer need to give Ekasataka any more cloth, because he's now kept 1 piece for himself and kept 1 piece for his wife. So now the king wanted to reward something else to him. So the king sent a messenger to the palace to bring 2 pieces of velvet cloth. Now these are very super expensive ones. These are really not ordinary people can afford it. Only the wealthiest people can afford it. So it's a very special one. And each of which was worth 100,000 pieces of gold. That's how expensive these are, and gave it to the Brahmin. So now Ekasataka has these 2 very expensive velvet cloth. And he decided to do something with it, because it is something so special. So he took these 2 pieces of very valuable cloth, right, and turned them into 2 canopies. Right? That means it's sort of like a shelter for the monks to sit under. So he made a canopy, sort of like an umbrella, but it's a very large one. It's not an umbrella, but sort of a canopy, right? A makeshift roofing, so that the monks could sit under it out in the open, right? So he made the canopy, right? And he placed them. He used 1 piece to make the canopy, and he used the other piece to place it inside the perfume chamber, and that is where the Buddha sleeps. Right? This is in Jetavana Monastery, and that is where the Buddha sleeps. So he placed the second piece inside this perfume chamber where the Buddha sleeps, right? And he placed it there so that it is a place where the monks can see it and make use of it when they needed it. Now, one day, the king came to the monastery. So the next time the king visited the monastery to pay homage to the Buddha, he saw the canopy and realized that that velvet canopy was the piece of velvet, very expensive velvet, that he had given to Ekasataka. And again, the king was very touched that Ekasataka is so generous. He never kept this abundance to himself. He gave them all away. He only kept what he really needed, and that is just 2 simple pieces for himself and his wife, and the rest he just gave them away. And the king was very, very delighted. Okay? And then the king thought to himself, he says, even as I have confidence and rejoice in my devotion, even so does this Brahmin Ekasataka, having confidence and rejoicing in his devotion too. So the king realized that, he himself is so devoted to the Buddha, and he's so happy to be a student of the Buddha. And he realized how blessed and how much this Ekasataka is also rejoicing being a student of the Buddha. Right? And that's what the king thought. And then accordingly, King Pasada now presented Ekasataka with a lot of gifts. Now he decided that this Brahmin deserves something even super special, and this is really extremely special. He gave Ekasataka and his wife what they call 7 kinds of force, right? And this is a very special type of gifts that the king only presents to very special people. So in this case, it is made of 4 elephants, right? 7 kinds of 4. First, 4 elephants, then 4 horses, and then 4 female slaves. They use the word slaves, but it's servants, 4 female slaves, and then 4 male slaves. So the male slaves will do the hard work, the female slaves will do the housework, right? And also 4 errand boys. And these are people who run around outside doing errands, running jobs for the Brahmin, you see. So 4 errand boys and 4 pieces of land in the village. They call it 4 villages, but it's actually 4 large pieces of land in the village, and then 4,000 pieces of gold, right? So 7 sets of 4s he gave to this Brahmin, Ekasataka. So actually, as a result of that, Ekasataka became a very blessed person, very wealthy now, right, with all these gifts. And the monks saw all this happening, and they were puzzled. They're noting that the great gifts that Ekasataka had received, then they were curious, and they started chit-chatting amongst themselves. You know, some of these younger monks, they always like to whisper, talk about things that's going on. So they were talking amongst themselves about Ekasataka and all the great gifts that he had received. And the Buddha noticed that. And as the Buddha approached the monks, the Buddha asked them, right? And so when the Buddha asked him, "What are you talking about?" And then the monks responded to the Buddha. They asked the Buddha, "How is it that in the case of this Brahmin, a good deed done at present bears fruit immediately?" So in other words, they have all been taught, if you do good deeds, eventually, sometime down the road, then you will receive the benefits, the fruition of your good deeds. But never immediately. It's always sometime later. You know, if you do good to other people, in the future, those people will then reciprocate and do good to you and be kind to you. So you get some fruits, some benefits much later, right? But here, the monks were very curious. How come whenever Ekasataka gave away a piece of rope, he got 2? He gave away 2, he got 4. And finally, when he gave away all 30 pieces, he got these 7 sets of 4s immediately from the king. So that's when the Buddha then expounded, right? The Buddha explained to the monks, and he said, "Monks, if the Brahmin had offered his outer garment in the first watch of the night, he would have been rewarded with great gifts of 16 each. If he had made his offering during the second watch of the night, he would have been rewarded with the great gifts of 8 each. Since he had made his offering only during the third watch of the night, he was rewarded with only the great gifts of 4 each." So in other words, what the Buddha was saying that, this Ekasataka in the beginning was hesitant. As he was listening to the Buddha's talk, during the first watch of the night, he hesitated. He did not give it to the Buddha. So he held back. During the second watch of the night, he held back again. And it was only during the third watch of the night that he actually offered his one and only robe to the Buddha. And because of that, he received 7 sets of 4. But the Buddha said, had he offered his one and only robe during the first watch of the night, he would have received 7 sets of 16, right? So, and if he did it on the second watch of the night, he would have received 7 sets of 8. But because he did it in the third watch of the night, he only received 7 sets of 4. So imagine if he had offered it early, he would have been super, super rich because he would have received 7 sets of 16 from the king, right? So this is what the Buddha explained to the monks that in this case, it is immediate and because of his selflessness, right? So monks, and the Buddha went on to say, so monks, when one wants to give in charity, one should do so promptly. If one procrastinates, the reward comes slowly and only sparingly. So, in other words, the Buddha was pointing out that if Ekasataka had not hesitated, his reward would even have been much greater. But because he did hesitate a little bit, his reward was not quite as great, But still, he eventually gave. He didn't. He did not hesitate completely, right? And then finally, the Buddha commented, if one is slow in doing good, one may not be able to do it at all, for the mind tends to take delight in the unwholesome. Now, this is very important because this last point is really the gist of this Dhammapada verse. If your mind is not focused on doing good, right? So if there's an opportunity to do good, but you didn't think about it, you didn't put your mind and heart into it, what would happen is that your mind becomes idle. Your mind will be thinking of other things. And because of that, you are lacking in this selflessness, this sense of selflessness, this sense of magnanimity, of giving away and generosity. And because of that, your mind could then be distracted by other thoughts that may be unwholesome, by lust and greed for pleasures, anger and hatred for the unpleasant experiences, and delusion and ignorance, right, of this self-centered existence. Right? So lobha, dosa, moha. So this is really what the Buddha was pointing out, that if you have an opportunity to do good, right, don't hesitate, just do it. Go ahead and do it. Don't hesitate. If you can afford it, just do it, right? Whatever it is, good. And sometimes good is not giving away all your money. It can also be helping somebody or volunteering your services and all kinds of things like that. So therefore, if you have an opportunity to do it, don't hesitate, okay? And this is basically the gist of this story, that if you do hesitate and your mind is not focused on doing good, your mind could be distracted by unwholesome thoughts. So if you keep centering your mind on the thoughts of doing good, your mind can be purified because you are practicing sila, right? Virtuous morality or good moral behavior. Right? Charity, giving are all part of sila. Sila is not just being a nice person or a good person, but also sharing, giving, generosity. That is really part and parcel of this thing called sila. Right? So this is the basic lesson there. Let's take a look at this verse 116 and look at very quickly run through the Pali verses. Kalyane means it is imbued with goodness, being virtuous. Now this comes from the same root word as Kalyana Mitra. All of you, those of you who are aware of this word, Kalyana Mitra, means spiritual friends, good friends, friends who are kind to you and you share in the learning and cultivation of the Dhamma. And that means it is really virtuous qualities imbued with goodness. So kalyane. So this is in that verse there, kalyane. And this next word means to be responsive, to respond to situations, situational alertness, and respond to it. Right? And basically, at the same time, you have to guard your emotional mind from evil. So in other words, when you have good things you can do, your mind is focused on doing good, and your mind is now guarded from this distraction, your emotional mind getting distracted by all kinds of unwholesome thinking. Right? At the same time, if one does hesitantly, that means if you are holding back, if you try to hold back, right, from doing good deeds, meritorious actions, what happens is that your mind, you start to think of things that may be unwholesome. And you begin to enjoy things like lust and greed, anger and hatred, delusion of self-centered existence. Right? So this is really the lesson from this Dhammapada verse. And I want to add one more commentary from Venerable Viragoda Sarada from Singapore, where he pointed out about this first part of this Dhammapada verse, right? Indulge in wholesome activities without any hesitancy or loss of time. The practice of the spiritual path has been called by the Buddha going upwards, the stream, going upstream. That means it's not easy flowing downstream, you see. Flowing downstream is the easy one. This is really striving to go upstream to finally attain the highest and most supreme bliss, right? And going against the stream, you can't go downstream, because going downstream is easy. You just let it flow, you know. But here you really have to work very hard to enter the stream and cultivate and train yourself, right? The normal tendency of the mind is to be carried away by emotions and do the wrong things. If one does not make the effort to go against this current, we will be doing the wrong things and going the wrong way most of the time. So in other words, we have to strive to work and work upstream to cultivate ourselves and develop ourselves. This is really the advice given by Venerable Viragoda Sarada. He's teaching in Singapore, teaching meditation in Singapore. Okay, if you're interested, you can Google his name, and he has actually written, published many editions of Dhammapada stories, and this is where I got my stories from. Okay, so the verse is: be expedient in doing good, restrain your mind from evil. He who hesitates in doing good, his mind is allured by evil. So that is the first verse, okay, that we are looking at, verse 116. Now we look at another connected verse, and that is verse 118. It says, should a person do good, let him do it again and again. Let him be joyful in giving, for blissful is the accumulation of good. So in other words, if you have done a good deed, realize that don't just do it one time and forget about it, right? After you have done a good deed, if there's an opportunity to do again, then do it again. Exactly what Ekasataka did. He gave away his one robe, then he got two, he gave away two, and then he got four, he gave away four. He just did it again and again and again, right? So should a person do good, let him do it again and again. Let him be joyful in giving. So when we give, be joyful. You're not losing something, you're gaining. What are you gaining? You are actually gaining the merits of your good deeds. And these merits will ripen as fruits, some immediately or in the future, and then you will then be able to enjoy the fruits of your labor, the fruits of your generosity. Okay, so for blissful is the accumulation of good. Here, accumulation of good is referring to people who are continuously doing good, so therefore they are actually continuously accumulating good merits. Right? So this is really this verse we're looking at. Let's look at the story behind it. This is the story called The Goddess and the Monk. Right? So the story is what the Buddha was referring to, this goddess Laja. Okay, Laja, and it began in Rajagaha. Rajagaha is an area with a lot of caves where a lot of ascetics practice. So there is one day this Mahakasaba, one of the senior disciples of the Buddha. Therefore, he's called Venerable Kasaba the Great. So Mahakasaba. So one day Mahakasaba was residing in a cave, right? Pipali cave. And he spent his time in the cave. He only comes out once in a while to collect alms food. And then there was one time he went into very deep meditation. He entered into a state of trance. Here, the word trance referred to a very deep state of meditation. Okay. Presumably, I'm just assuming, I didn't check the Pali words in the commentary, but I think he was into this state of trance called Sanya Vedayita Nirodha. That means bringing the mind to a state of stopping the mind, not just still the mind, but stopping the mind. And this practice is only done by very highly cultivated mind and monk, usually very high level arahants. I mean, there are ordinary arahants and there are arahants who have very high attainments. And being able to practice this Sanya Vedayita Nirodha is one of the highest attainment. In fact, that is the highest attainment in meditation. If you reach that state, you are the arahant. You have become an arahant, and that is really called the double awakening arahant, an arahant who has attained a very high level of awakening. And in that state, the mind cannot be stopped for more than 7 days. After 7 days, they come out of it. So he was in that trance for 7 days, and then he came out of it, arising from the trance on the 7th day. Remember, 7 days is maximum, so not on the 8th day, because that's too late. Usually what happens is that when a person enters into that state, Sanya Vedayita Nirodha, Sanya Vedayita Nirodha, after 7 days, on the 8th day, the body would basically stop functioning, and that would consider the person have died, right? So on the 8th day, that person would no longer be alive because the mind has completely stopped. So now on the 7th day, he got out of it, right? So that's why I presumably thought that it must be this Sanya Vedayita Nirodha, right? So now he came out of it, and usually anyone who has attained that state of awakening has psychic powers, right? This is a very high level of arahantship, right? To be able to reach that. Then people who have done that, they are able to develop certain psychic powers. So when he came out of his trance, just like what Buddha does. See, every morning Buddha goes into deep meditation, and then this is before he goes on his alms round. He goes into deep meditation the first thing in the morning, and for quite some time, maybe a few hours. When he comes out of it, the Buddha would survey the land and see what's happening around him. In the same way, Mahakasapa is doing the same thing. As he came out of the trance, he started to survey around the area outside the cave and see what's going on. So he surveyed with his supernatural vision, his psychic power, and look around where is a good place he can take his alms bowl and go and collect alms. Remember, this is really in the hills, in the cave area. In those areas, there are not many places where people can offer alms food. You'd have to go very far to find a village inhabited by a lot of villagers, then only you can get alms food. But there could be some people living in random spots here and there, they might be offering food. So Mahakasapa was scanning around to see where is a good place he could go and collect some alms food. So as he looked across, abroad means look across, and then he saw this young lady, right, a certain woman, was working in the paddy field, and the keeper of a field. So in other words, she's tending to one particular lot, a small plot of land where she's planting the rice. And she was actually, I don't know whether cooking or just heating. Parching means putting heat to it. Maybe she was cooking rice. So she was just parching these heads of rice, which she had gathered. So maybe she was just using fire to heat up the rice, okay? And then Mahakasapa thought to himself, is she endowed with faith or is she not endowed with faith? So what the word faith here basically refers to a person who follows the teachings of the Buddha, right? That's all it is. In other words, Mahakasapa was asking himself, is this lady a person who abides by the teaching of the Buddha? Therefore, if the monk approached her, she would give alms. Whereas a person who does not abide by the teachings of the Buddha and they do their own things, when they see a monk coming, they don't care because to them it's not their business. So in this case, if that person is following the teachings of the Buddha, that person would then become very devoted to attend to monks and offer alms food to the monks. So Mahakasapa was asking himself, okay, this lady, is she a follower or is she not a follower? Then he realized, oh yes, she must be, because you see, he has the ability to sort of, to some degree, read people's mind. So straight away becoming aware, oh, this lady is a follower. Then Mahakasapa asked himself again, now if I were to approach her, will she offer alms, right? Because if she had nothing to offer, then there's no point. But in this case, Mahakasapa is checking out whether this young lady has the resources to offer alms food. And then again, Mahakasapa thought to himself, oh yes, she has, right? And then he thought to himself, this noble young woman is wise and resourceful. She will render me assistance, and as the result of so doing, she will receive a rich reward. So in other words, Mahakasapa is well aware now this lady does have some resources to be able to offer alms food. And if she does that, that means she's giving, then she actually will enjoy the benefit, the reward of giving. And that's when Mahakasapa realized, okay, I will go there. So he put on his robes and he took his alms bowl, and then he went towards the paddy field where this young noble woman was tending to the field, right? And just stood next to the field. They never asked monks who want alms food. They will just stand there and wait for the devotee to make the offering. So when the young lady saw him coming, she realized, oh, yeah, a monk coming with an alms bowl. It's time for me to offer some alms food. So she felt very motivated, and out of faith and devotion, she felt very happy. Oh, now I have a chance to offer alms food to a monk. Because normally, working in the paddy field, you don't see monks passing by so easily, right? Monks usually go to the villages to wait for alms food. They don't come to these remote areas. So she's very glad that there is this monk coming in such a remote area. Now she has a chance to offer alms food. So she got very excited. So when she saw the monk there, she realized she had to tell the monk that she's going to do it. So she said to Mahakasapa, wait a moment, Venerable, wait a moment, I'm going to get something for you. So she went ahead and prepared the rice from the harvest she had just taken. So taking some of the parched rice, presumably she cooked it, right? She went quickly to Mahakasapa and poured the rice into the Venerable's bowl. And then she paid homage and saluted. That means she went on her all five, right? The two hands, the two knees, and the forehead touching the ground. That's what it's meant by five. Five rests, five-pointed salute, okay? And then she said, Venerable, may I be a partaker of the truth you have seen. In other words, she's asking Mahakasapa, may I now listen to some wise words from you? That's really what it's meant. May I be a partaker. That means a partaker means to participate in the truth you have seen. That means whatever it is that you have knowledge about, please share it with me. That's really what she's trying to say. Right? So Mahakasapa went ahead and delivered a short talk to her. Okay, so be it, replied Venerable, pronouncing the words of thanksgiving. And then, of course, at the end of that short Dhamma talk, he thanked her, right? And then they decided to go on their own way. As Mahakasapa was leaving, right, this young lady also saluted to Mahakasapa and also decided to go home also, return to her home. As she was walking home, she started to reflect on what had transpired, reflected upon the alms she had given, reflecting upon the teaching that Mahakasapa had delivered, and the thanksgiving, right? The blessing that Mahakasapa had delivered to her. So her mind is very engrossed in these good thoughts. However, along the road where firstly Mahakasapa had gone past, by the side of the road, there was a poisonous snake. As Mahakasapa passed by, the poisonous snake following Mahakasapa wanted to bite Mahakasapa, but was not able to do so because Mahakasapa was wearing the robe. The snake was not able to bite the venerable leg, for it was covered with his yellow robe. So in other words, the snake gave up and just slipped back into the side of the road. Then the young lady came by. Okay. So as the noble young woman passed by that spot, right where the snake is, deep in thought, she's reflecting on the alms that she had given. She's reflecting on the Dhamma talk that she received from the lessons, the words of wisdom she received from Mahakasapa, and she reflected on the blessing, the thanksgiving she received. She was so happy. Her mind is so deep engrossed in that she didn't notice the snake. As she passed by the spot, deep in thought, reflecting upon the alms she had given to the venerable, the snake managed to wiggle its way out and bit her, right? Because she would be walking slowly, and the snake finally managed to bite her. And because it is a poisonous snake, right, it caused her to fall to the ground, right? And she was now near death. Eventually, she died. But in those final moments, those dying moments, her mind was focused on the alms she was giving, the wisdom, words of wisdom she received from the venerable, and also the blessing, the thanksgiving she received from the venerable. So her mind was deep in thought in that. And because her mind was focused on these wholesome thoughts, thoughts of goodness, when she passed away, she was reborn in the higher realm, in the Deva realm, the Tavatimsa realm. This is commonly called the world of 33. There are many stories why it is called the world of 33, but I won't go into it, okay? Because depending on whether you ask a Theravadan or you ask a Mahayana, it's different story why they call it 33. But bear in mind, this is in the Deva realm. Now she had become a Deva. So she's now a goddess. And this is actually the realm. Tavatimsa is the realm where the chief of Tavatimsa is King Saka. Saka is the king of all the devas in the Tavatimsa realm. Okay. So as a goddess, she frequently came down to human realm to do things, to do good deeds, right? So she does that a lot. So she came down from time to time, and she also knew where Mahakasapa lived. So she came down to the the temple where the Mahakasapa was living, and went to go to his room and started cleaning the room and clearing the rubbish and setting the bed right and preparing the drinking water so that when Mahakasapa comes back from his alms, everything is perfectly done for him. So in other words, she was cleaning his room and attending to the things that are there while he was not in, right? Because you have to bear in mind that she's not allowed to be there when the monk is in, right? Because she's a female, and then she cannot be present together with the monk inside the monk's quarters, okay? So when the venerable comes back every day and notice that something had been done, oh, the whole place is cleaned up, well kept, the bed is perfectly done, water is prepared, drinking water is prepared. So he was thinking, some probationer or novice must have rendered me the service. So he was thinking, oh, some novice monk or junior monk may be doing it. or some lay people who had taken 10 precepts. That's why they're called the probationers. Then must be the ones doing it. So he was very pleased, okay? But he was also very curious. Who would that be? On the second day, it was done. So again, he was very surprised. Oh, now it's again and again and again, it's happening. Finally, on the third day, well, they say the third day, maybe it's a few days later. Every day it was done. So finally, one day, when Mahakasapa came back a bit early, he heard some sound, the sound of sweeping and cleaning. So he realized that whoever was the person doing all this work in his room must be still inside there doing that. So instead of opening the door and going in, right, he peeped through the little keyhole and saw this radiant image of her body. So, she was bright, and because she's a goddess, she's not an ordinary human being. She's a deva. And Mahakasapa, being a highly enlightened monk, would have the ability to see these devas. And straight away he asked, he was curious who she is. Then now he asked her, he was just curious in his mind first, who is that is sweeping? So he asked, who are you? And this goddess then replied, it is I, Venerable, your female disciple, the goddess Laja. So Mahakasapa was thinking, I don't have a student by that name. I have no female disciple by that name. Right? Goddess Laja. Then Goddess Laja then replied, Venerable, remember when I was a young woman tending a rice field, I gave you parched rice. And as I returned on my way home, a snake bit me and I died with believing heart and was reborn in the heavenly world. So she recounted what had happened, that at the moment she died, her final thought moment at time of death was basically thinking about giving, thinking about learning words of wisdom from the Venerable, and also receiving blessings, thanksgiving blessings from the Venerable. So her mind was very focused on the Dhamma at the moment of death. That's why she then died and became a deva, right? Reborn in the heavenly world. So since it was through you that I received this glory, I said to myself, I will perform the major and minor duties for you, and so make my salvation sure. So here I am, Venerable. Now, realize that even as a deva, she is not yet enlightened. Okay? Even the devas are not enlightened. They have to return as human being to become enlightened. So this is why they say a sotapan is a person who is a 7-time returner. That means such a person would return to the human realm, reborn in the human realm 7 times maximum. Sometimes not even once or twice. Okay, and then of course Sakadagami is the once returner. So to come back to the human realm 1 time. Right? So she is likely to be a sotapan or a Sakadagami. Okay. Not an anagami, because an anagami would not be in the Tavatimsa realm. The anagami would be in the Sudavasa realm. So in this case, she must be a sotapan or a Sakadagami, and now she wanted to strive for enlightenment. Right? So that's why she decided that doing all these good deeds for Mahakasapa, then she would have a chance at becoming enlightened. Okay. Was it you who cleaned the place for me yesterday and on the days before that, and setting out the water for drinking, the bed, clearing the rubbish, and so on? And of course she said, yes, Venerable, it is me. And now the Mahakasapa was a little bit hesitant, because he realized that it is not right for a monk and a female to be in the same inside his quarters. So he was a little concerned that this is not good right, as a practicing monk. So then he decided to tell her, it's time for you to go. You don't do this anymore. Right? Normally, monks don't have females attending to them. They only have male novice monks attending to them. So this is quite unusual to have a female goddess attending to a monk. And Mahakasapa didn't think that was proper and told her to leave. Please depart immediately, goddess. Never mind about the duties you have rendered, but come no more to this abode. Come no more to my kuti, right? Because he didn't want that to happen. Then then the goddess was a little bit disappointed. Venerable, please do not destroy me. Allow me to perform these services for you, so make my salvation assured. She wanted to do this because she wanted to keep doing good over and over again so that she can finally become enlightened through her deeds. But Mahakasapa said, no. Goddess, please depart immediately, lest in the future, when expounders of the law take the variegated fan and sit down, they have reason to say, report has it that a goddess comes and performs the major and minor duties for Venerable Kasapa, setting out water and so on. So in other words, Mahakasapa was pointing out that if she continued to do that, the elders, right? Elders are the people who then, here it is saying, variegated fan and sit down. That means the whole group of senior monks, the elders, with their fan, they have this special fan, and these are the ones who basically make sure that everybody follow the Vinaya rules. So they would have declared that Kasapa would have violated the rules if he allowed the goddess to continue, right? If he didn't know, it's okay, but he knew, so he had to tell her to leave. That's really the bottom line, okay? And in the end, the goddess Laja was very, very sad, very disappointed, and she started lamenting, feeling sad. She started to cry. And of course, she's a goddess. She's not like an ordinary human being. So she was up in the air, but she was lamenting. I mean, she's feeling sad and crying. She would then be leaving. She would not stay in the kuti of Kasapa. Okay, and the Buddha knew about this. As the Buddha sat in his perfume chamber in Jetavana Monastery, he heard the sound of her crying, her lamentation. Okay, so the Buddha then sent an image of himself. The Buddha didn't go there personally. The Buddha sent an image, a luminous image of himself, to approach Goddess Laja. So went to see Goddess Laja to comfort her, right? And then this image sat in front of the Goddess Laja, facing the Goddess Laja, and started to speak to Goddess Laja. So it's Buddha using his psychic powers, right, to approach the Goddess Laja to speak to her, right? Goddess, it was indeed the duty of my son Kasapa the Great to restrain himself. But they who desire to perform works of merit conclude this one thing alone is needful, and recognize the doing of works of merit, and as their sole duty. Indeed, both in this world and the world to come, it is the doing of good works alone that brings happiness. So in other words, he was encouraging her, don't give up, you must continue to do good. Well, doesn't mean that she goes back to Kasapa's kuti, but could be other works of good. So it was Buddha encouraging her to continue to do good whenever, wherever she can. Don't stop doing it just because of one misstep, okay? Just because that misstep. And the Buddha also explained that Kasapa had the right to stop her, to restrain himself, because it's not right for Kasapa to have a female goddess in his kuti, right? So that's why Kasapa had to tell her to go. right? So if a monk knows about it, the monk has to do something. So therefore, Kasaba had to tell her to go, and that is normal. And Buddha was encouraging this goddess not to stop doing good. Okay, and then he went on and expounded the next verse. This verse 118. Okay, preaching and pronounced this verse 118. So let's take a look at the Pali of this 118. It says, if some person were to do meritorious activities, right, and repeatedly over and over, okay, and therefore in that should take delight in it, be joyful. So in other words, if you are doing meritorious activities, good work, do it over and over again and rejoice in it. Be delighted with it, right? Do it happily, and blissful accumulation of merits. So be happy. So therefore, this verse basically says, should a person do good, let him do it again and again. Let him be joyful in giving, for blissful is the accumulation of good. Okay, so this is really, hopefully this is a very good lesson to all of you. So these are the two verses that I have shared, which talks about the goodness of giving. Okay, now there's one sutra I have already shared this online, so I'm not going to repeat. It's quite lengthy to explain. There are 7 motivations. So this is the Dhana Mahapala Sutra. Dhana, as we know, is giving. Maha is great. Pala is the fruition, right? The fruits from your action. So Dhana Mahapala means the great benefits or the great fruition of giving. And this sutra normally is Anguttara Nikaya 7.52. If you go to Sutra Central, you will find it at 7.52. But in Access to Insight, the older text, you will find it at 749. Somehow there is a difference in the numbering. So I'm not sure the background behind that. But if you can't find it in one, you find it in the other. And sometimes this sutra is given the shortcut name, Dhana Sutra, right? But the full name of this sutra is Dhana Mahapala Sutra. So I have already delivered this talk and I have extracted this. This is a short talk uploaded in YouTube. So go to this link and you will see the YouTube version, 35 minutes roughly, where I spoke about this sutra. It's only 35 minutes. It's a short extract from a longer Dhamma talk I gave. So I won't repeat that here because it's 35 minutes, quite a bit of speaking there. And you can also download the slides when you go in there and you see you see this YouTube video, then you can see the links to download the slides. Okay, so I'll leave it at that. I will not expound on this. I have basically finished all my talking. Now, very quickly, what is this Dhana Mahapala Sutra? It started off with the Buddha living in this particular place near the lake. And when the villagers heard that the Buddha was in town, they wanted to go and listen to the Buddha's teaching. But unfortunately, that time, the Buddha was busy only with some other things and teaching only the monks. So the lay people would not have a chance to listen to the Buddha. So the lay villagers came to the monastery, came to the place where the Buddha was staying. It's not really a monastery, but some place, and wanted to listen to the Buddha's discourses. And then they were met by Venerable Sariputta. And Sariputta told them, no, you can't just walk in here and join in, right? These are special sessions. But every full moon, the Buddha would deliver a discourse to all the lay people. Please come back on the next full moon. So the Sariputta told them, okay, you can go back. At the next full moon, you may then come back and the Buddha will deliver a discourse for you. So on the next full moon, these villagers came back. And in order for Sariputta to help the villagers along, because Sariputta knew that these villagers were coming to offer alms food to the Buddha and the contingent of monks, and therefore the Buddha wanted them to listen to a very important sutra, very important teaching. So the Buddha, Sariputta, I beg your pardon, I don't know what happened there. Okay. Sariputta took that opportunity to intentionally ask the Buddha a question, so that when the Buddha answered the question, it would become like a discourse. Okay, so the Buddha asked this question. Sariputta asked this question. Of course, Sariputta knew the answer, but he asked this question to help the villagers realize that this is something they should learn. So the Sariputta asked the Buddha, might there be the case where one person gives a gift of a certain kind and it does not bear great fruits or benefits, and yet another person gives a gift of the same kind and it bears great fruit and great benefit? Right? Why is that? So Sariputta asked the Buddha, why is this so? In other words, he's saying, one person gives something, does a certain charitable act, giving something away, but he gets no benefits from it. He does not realize the fruition of what he was giving. Another person giving the same thing and yet could immediately or sometime later receive the benefits of it, the fruition of it, right? So why is it two people giving the same thing, one person doesn't get doesn't see any results in his own life, the other person gets rewarded in many ways, right? Okay, so that is the question, and the Buddha went on to explain there are 7 motivations. So I won't discuss anymore. Go to this link and look and listen to my sharing there. So this link is to a YouTube sharing, 35 minutes, explaining this sutra. So by all means, listen to that, okay? And you can then download the slides for that particular sutra, or you can download the sutra from online and then listen to that, okay? Now, last week I gave another sharing, right? And I spoke about the Buddha Kasaba. So for those of you who are not aware, before the time of Gautama Buddha, there had been many Buddhas in the past, but they are few and far between. So it would have been very long time before a previous Buddha was there. And one of the previous Buddha was Kasaba Buddha, okay? And this is one of the teachings of the Kasaba Buddha, where he declared, he said, about giving, okay? He said, he himself gives alms, but does not urge others to give. That man, in his future states of existence, receives the blessing of wealth, but not the blessing of a retinue, okay? I have explained this before, but I'll just repeat myself one more time here. So here, Kasaba Buddha was just saying, if a person were to give, right, and he's just giving by his own self, but he does not urge others, he does not encourage other people to give also, he will gain the benefit of wealth, the blessing of wealth in his future life. Or it could be another in the present life or in the future life, whatever it is, the blessing of wealth. And that is actually what happened. If you remember earlier the story about Ekasakata, he was giving the robe, the only robe. He was then getting back many things in return and became very wealthy. So it was a blessing of wealth, but not the blessing of a retinue. What is a retinue? A retinue basically means a group of followers, people who listen to you, people who obey whatever you instruct them or teach them, people who look up to you, right? People who revere you, and people who admire you. That is what is called a retinue. So in other words, you have some followers, admirers, and people who are more than willing to help you. So in other words, if you are giving, but you don't encourage other people to give, you may experience the blessing of wealth in your future life, but you will not experience the blessing of having followers, admirers, listeners, right? and helpers. Okay, you will not have that blessing. Then Kasaba Buddha went on to say, another man urges others to give, but does not himself give. That man receives in his future states of existence the blessing of retinue, but not the blessing of wealth. So in other words, if a person is doing a lot of fundraising, getting other people to donate, but he himself doesn't donate, he himself doesn't do anything, he will not have the blessing of retinue. He will not have followers. But, he will not have the blessing of wealth because he did not contribute. He was not generous. He had not practiced generosity, Dhana. But because he encouraged other people to give, then he would receive the blessing of retinue. That means in his future life, he may have people following him, listening to him, people admiring him. So that is a retinue. So he would then experience the benefit of a retinue. Then Kasaba Buddha went on to say, another man neither himself gives nor urges others to give. That man in his future states of existence receives neither the blessing of wealth nor the blessing of a retinue, but lives as an eater of remnants. So in other words, if a person does not do any giving, he's very selfish, keeps everything to himself, and he doesn't encourage other people to give. Right? In his future life, he will never experience the blessing of wealth nor the blessing of retinue. And in fact, he would live his life as an eater of remnants. An eater of remnants means a person who eats other people's leftover food. In other words, it's more or less, you can say it's like a beggar. Right? Somebody who does not have enough money to buy his own food will have to depend on other people giving him old food. Right? He will go to other people's backyard waiting for people to finish their meal, and as they have any leftovers, he will then eat that. That is the eater of remnants. So a person who is like that will end up in that kind of fate. And finally, Kasaba Buddha went on to say, another man not only himself gives, but also urges others to give. That man in his future states of existence receives both the blessing of wealth and the blessing of a retinue. In other words, if a person is generous, he gives. He takes whatever he has and he gives it away. He's not holding back. At the same time, he works very hard to encourage other people to give, to urge other people, I'm helping out. You go ahead and help me, and let's do this together. He urged other people to give. He will experience the benefit of both, the blessing of wealth and the blessing of a retinue. So here you have it, that Kasaba Buddha has pointed out the goodness of giving, and also encouraging and urging others to give likewise. Okay, so with that, I end my presentation. I hope it has been helpful. You can use this link to download the slides for today, including the slides for this sutra, the Dhana Mahapala Sutra, and you can go to that link and listen to the YouTube presentation of the Dhana Mahapala Sutra. Right? And the slides are actually in today's sharing. Okay, so I hope this has been helpful. Let's take a look at the question. We have a question here. Let me take a look from Sister Evelyn. Seeking clarification, as I remembered, first night watch 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Second watch 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Third watch 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. Are these correct? If so, did Buddha shared and Ekasataka listen until third night watch? Okay. First, in those days, there is no clock. Nobody knows the time. But what happens is first watch is basically the evening. After the sun has gone down, the sky is dark. Right? And if there's moon, the moon is out. So it is dark. The beginning of the darkness for a couple of hours. So that would be around 6 to 7 p.m. right until maybe 8 to 10 p.m. So in a way, yes, you're right. The second would be then in the deep dark. That means now it is in the middle of the night. So that would be around midnight time, 10 p.m. until midnight, perhaps until 2 a.m., something like that. And then the third watch of the night would then be after the midnight, sometime after midnight, as the night begins to wear off, eventually the sun will rise. So just before the sunrise. So that you're correct. So it would be around 2 a.m. until the sunrise. In some countries, it arises at 6 a.m. In some countries, it rises a bit later. I think in Malaysia, it's a little bit later because we are, our timing is quite far ahead, right? In some countries, then it would be a little bit earlier, okay, depending. But yes, more or less, you could say that is more or less matching those 3 watches of the night, okay? And the second part of your question, if so, did the Buddha share with an Ekasataka listen until third watch of the night? Now, the Buddha does not always keep delivering discourse throughout the night, right? What happens is the Buddha will deliver the discourse until quite late, and then the Buddha will sit there and let the monks ask questions and will answer questions. And probably in the third watch of the night, most likely it will be Q&A already. So the Buddha would be available to any monk who wants to ask. Now, it's quite common for monks to retire a bit early and then they wake up very early. Some monks wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then that would still be the third watch of the night. And then, right, depends. Some people practice that. So I don't know exactly whether the Buddha would be teaching until that time, but not always the Buddha would teach until that time. Okay. So the Buddha sleeps very little. He doesn't actually need to sleep like human beings, but he just rests. Okay. So I hope that answers your question. Okay. Is there any other question? Looks like there are no other questions. So anybody has any question, please post them so I can answer. All right. Meanwhile, just to remind you to download, okay, that presentation slides, okay. All right, looks like there's no question. Let's finish off. We have spent this past 1.5 hours together sharing the Dhamma, and we have all benefited from it. And we also know a lot of people are suffering. Right now, just all of you know, many parts of Malaysia has been flooded. So a lot of people, poor people, their homes have water in the house. Some poor villages, whole house is flooded. So there's a lot of people who are suffering. I also want to point out one important thing. Those of you who have been following me in WhatsApp, you will know. Last week, there was a super typhoon, Typhoon Rai. In Philippines, they call it Odette. They have their own local name. Typhoon Odette. It was a Signal 5 typhoon, very powerful typhoon that ripped through the central Philippines. And accordingly, about more than 100 lives were lost, and thousands of homes were damaged, and hundreds of homes were completely wiped out. And most of these homes that are wiped out are poor people's homes. So they are all suffering. And I'm actually right now in the midst of trying to get donations to send money. I've already sent one round. I'm with the help of a good friend of mine, Father Bong of St. Vincent Seminary. He will help me dispatch those donations through his seminary. Seminary is like a monastery, a Catholic monastery where they teach young monks or young monks or whatever. Yeah, they teach them. So it's called seminary. It's an educational place. So they will be the ones helping to use the money to help these poor people who are suffering from that. Okay, there are also people suffering from coronavirus pandemic. So let's put our palms together and recite together. I'll just add a little bit more to the end of that. Okay, let's put our palms together and recite this together. We dedicate the merits we have acquired from sharing the Buddha Dhamma to all beings affected by the coronavirus pandemic around the world. We are also sharing these merits with all beings who are affected by the flooding in this part of the world and the super typhoon in the Philippines, where hundreds of lives were lost, thousands of homes were destroyed. So they are suffering. So let us share our merits with them. May suffering beings be suffering free. May the fear-struck fearless be. May grieving beings shed all grief. May all beings find peace and relief. By the grace of the merits we have acquired, may we never follow the foolish. May we follow only the wise until we attain the highest and most supreme bliss of Nibbana. Idang me tinang ho tu sukita hon tu tayo. Idang me tinang ho tu sukita hon tu tayo. Idang me tinang ho tu sukita hon tu tayo. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much for joining us. If you are interested in helping out, offering donations, in today's download, you will find my Facebook link. You have the Facebook link. You will also find my email address. Feel free to contact me and I'll give you my bank account. I don't want to post it, openly in public, but if you're interested to offer donations, please contact me. We're not collecting clothing because that's expensive to ship. We're just collecting money and I will be sending it to the Philippines, and the people in the Philippines, the seminary, they will be the ones doing buy the necessary items and distributing them. So please contact me. You can find you have my Facebook link and you can find my email address. Okay. So thank you very much. Have a good evening. May you be well, comfortable, peaceful, and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.